When then Archbishop Robert Prevost encountered Isadora Mejia, an 11-year-old girl, during the 2024 Education and Faith Fair in Lima, no one could have predicted the unfolding of that meeting. Isadora, a fifth-grade student living in the Sequillo neighborhood, did not stand out at first glance. She was reserved, soft-spoken, a lover of books, and fascinated by science and theology. However, beneath her modest appearance hid an extraordinary mind. Tests revealed an IQ of 195, significantly above the estimated IQ of Albert Einstein. Everything changed the moment the shy girl questioned a theological and ethical inconsistency in an educational project promoted by catechists that used artificial intelligence to teach Catholic doctrine. Instead of being ignored or reprimanded, something surprising happened. Robert Prevost, upon hearing her concern, interrupted the protocol, stepped down from the stage, and asked to see the notebook where she had written her observations. With humility, he acknowledged that she was right. From that gesture, both their lives took an unexpected turn. Robert understood that Isadora's unique way of thinking could represent an essential bridge between faith and technology, between tradition and the future. That seemingly casual encounter ended up revealing a deeper calling, capable of transforming not only how the Church dialogues with new generations, but also Isadora's own destiny. That day, she was sitting in the last row of the auditorium at San Francisco de Assis School, holding a blue notebook with trembling hands. The vastness of the room contrasted with the restless silence of nearly 2,000 people waiting for the conference. Nervousness took over her body, but she remained firm. It was hard to believe that just a month earlier she had lived a peaceful routine at Santa Clara Elementary School without any notoriety. It all began with an IQ test given as part of a study on child cognitive development. Without great expectations, Isadora answered the questions with the naturalness of someone facing just another school task. 3 weeks later, the school administration summoned her parents for an urgent meeting. The university psychologist could hardly contain her emotion when announcing that they had never recorded such a high score. With an IQ of 195, Isadora surpassed even the greatest geniuses in history. The repercussions were immediate. Cameras appeared at the modest Mejia family home's door, television programs began showing her face, and researchers from major universities showed interest in studying her brain. For such a young girl, all of that was both fascinating and frightening. Back in the auditorium, a voice over the speakers interrupted her memories, enthusiastically announcing the arrival of the Archbishop of Lima, Dom Robert Prevost, a known advocate of dialogue between faith and reason. The audience greeted him with applause as he ascended the stage with calm steps, wearing a white robe and a golden cross on his chest. Isadora already knew him from TV, but there, before her, he seemed less an institutional figure and more a man willing to listen. With calm and measured speech, Dom Robert spoke for 20 minutes about the importance of uniting spiritual and scientific wisdom, citing St. Thomas Aquinas and encouraging young people to seek the common good. Then he addressed a topic that immediately caught Isadora's attention: the use of digital platforms in religious education. She had already read everything about that project on the Archdiocese's website. She was excited but also alarmed. There was a serious conceptual flaw, something that deeply compromised children's understanding of free will and conscience. At the end of the lecture, Dom Robert opened the floor for questions. Many hands went up, and a volunteer with a microphone circulated among the attendees. After answering questions about vocations and youth, the Archbishop looked toward the back of the auditorium and suggested giving the floor to a young girl in a blue dress. Isadora froze. Her teacher, sensing the moment, encouraged her with a slight gesture. Overwhelmed by nervousness, she stood up with shaky legs, holding the microphone with small, sweaty hands. Her voice was hesitant as she announced her name to everyone, silently wishing her parents were there. But at that moment, she didn't know she was about to change not only her own path, but also that of the man listening to her with unusual attention. Isadora's voice started trembling, but soon gained strength. She stood amid whispers and turning pages, rising like a beacon of courage in the center of the room. There was something wrong with the orphanage renovation project, and she knew she could no longer stay silent. The parish hall, previously lively, fell into tense silence. Even the seminarians stopped writing. Robert Prevost, seated at the center of the stage, tilted his head slightly. His smile, until then constant, gradually disappeared. Isadora spoke about the roof. She explained that the fiber cement tiles chosen for the work, according to public documents, could degrade after a few years and release harmful particles, too dangerous for a place full of children. The attentive eyes of the audience turned to her. Isadora's cheeks burned, but her voice did not falter. She said she had researched safer, sustainable materials and had found better alternatives, more durable, more humane. Robert observed her with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Isadora feared ridicule or being ignored, but the bishop only asked a simple question, disarming all expectations. "How old are you?" 11. She was in 5th grade. A nun leaned toward Robert's ear and whispered something. His eyes widened with surprise. Then, with the microphone in hand, he asked if she was the girl mentioned in the reports, the one who had achieved extraordinary IQ test results. Isadora nodded, her stomach in knots. The test followed her like a label. She preferred to be recognized for what she loved, not by the number that classified her. Robert stepped down from the stage. Murmurs filled the room. Cell phone cameras were raised. He crossed the central aisle with calm steps until he stopped in front of her. The question came with unexpected kindness. "Did you really read the technical reports?" She did. She found the documents on the Archdiocese's website. She was fascinated by architecture and concerned about the children's health. She had to research unknown terms, but understood the essentials. Robert smiled, and for a moment ceased to look like the man in purple and gold cross. He seemed just a caring grandfather before a brave granddaughter. He asked to see her notes. Isadora opened the blue notebook. Inside, pages full of drawings, graphs, and detailed explanations. She showed the process of material wear and proposed more suitable alternatives. Robert carefully flipped through the pages with almost liturgical respect. The hall waited, suspended between surprise and wonder. Finally, he raised his eyes. "This is remarkable," he declared. "I think you might be right." He turned to the members of the renovation committee, all seated on the stage, confused and silent. "Sisters and brothers," he announced with a projected voice, "I believe we are witnessing something extraordinary. An 11-year-old girl identified a serious flaw in our project that went unnoticed by the entire technical team. There was more than recognition in those words. There was humility." Then he addressed Isadora again. "We need to talk more. Would you agree to present these notes to the diocese's architecture team?" Isadora just nodded, too stunned to find words. Inglés, the main spotlight moved until it found her. The light illuminated her face as if, for a moment, the whole world had turned entirely toward her. More than 2,000 eyes watched her. It was then that, with a still soft but firm voice, Isadora gave her full name. She stated her age. Another sister approached Bishop Robert and whispered something to him. His eyes narrowed with renewed interest. "Are you the girl who corrected the chapter on Thomas Aquinas in the New School Catechism?" She nodded again. The shame was familiar. The discomfort of being seen only as the smart girl at school. She wanted people to notice her love for God and for truth, not just her memory or logic. Teacher Teresa put a caring hand on her shoulder, trying to protect her from sudden exposure. But Bishop Robert was already continuing. He told everyone present that this same girl had identified a theological error that had slipped past an entire committee of reviewers. A subtle but profound mistake. He turned to her with genuine interest. "How did you notice that?" Isadora took a deep breath. She thought of her mother, who was in the hospital, and her father, working as a carpenter on some makeshift site. She said the corrected passage claimed that Thomas Aquinas believed grace cancelled reason, but that was the opposite of what he taught. According to Thomas, grace perfects reason. It does not destroy it. Robert listened without interrupting. He asked her to continue. Isadora then showed a new set of diagrams, explaining how this error could cause serious misunderstandings about the relationship between faith and science. She cited the Summa Theologiae and also recent interpretations by Benedict XVI. The silence was now reverent. Even the seminarians were still. A bishop and a child shared a rare space there, that of true listening. And no one knew at that moment that this exchange would forever mark not only Isadora Mejia's life, but also the course of the social work being born there, under a new roof, now perhaps safer and more just. Bishop Robert tilted his head with a sparkle in his eyes, visibly impressed by the girl before him. There was something deeply admirable about this young one. He wanted to know how, at such a young age, she had become interested in theology. Isadora explained simply and sincerely that it was her grandmother who taught her to pray, who introduced her to the universe of the saints. After that, she began studying on her own. She took pleasure in understanding the reasons behind faith, why we believe what we believe. He smiled, amazed, only 11 years old, and a depth lacking in so many adults. Teacher Teresa, proud, made a point of sharing one of her students' achievements. Isadora had won the school spirituality fair with a presentation about Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. The judges had been impressed by the depth of her reflections. Bishop Robert shook the teacher's hand in recognition and turned again to the girl. He said there was a rare blessing there, the union of faith, study, and humility. Isadora lowered her eyes. She admitted quietly that she could not ignore what she thought was wrong, especially when it came to matters of God. Bishop Robert immediately understood. In his eyes, there was empathy. Turning to the audience gathered in the auditorium, he proposed a change in the schedule. He wanted to hear more from Isadora, to give space for her to share her reflections. According to him, it was exactly this kind of thoughtful, living, and sincere faith that should be cultivated. A murmur of delight ran through the crowd. Isadora hesitated. Her eyes widened at the idea. She said she didn't know if she could do it. But Bishop Robert, with the serenity of one who has heard more than spoken in life, reassured her. She didn't need to go on stage. It was enough to know her voice was valuable. Sometimes, he said, the Spirit speaks more loudly in the pure heart of a child. Mrs. Gonzalez gave her an encouraging nod, saying the decision was hers, but that, in her opinion, she would be wonderful. Isadora thought of all the times she had been silent to avoid seeming strange, the questions she had kept for fear. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Then she said firmly, "I will try." Soon, a chair and microphone were brought to her. On the big screen, the pages of her notebook were projected. Sitting beside Bishop Robert, Isadora began to speak. At first, her voice trembled as she expressed her doubts about how charity was organized in certain parishes. But as she addressed topics such as the common good and the gospel, fear gave way to conviction. Bishop Robert listened attentively. His responses came in simple but meaningful words. He treated her as a thinker, not as a child. When Isadora suggested ways to involve young people in social actions, he called a sister from the audience to listen. Sister Lucia, examining the notebook, confessed to being moved. She said those ideas were concrete, full of life, and that they had tried something similar before, but without knowing how to start. At the end of the conversation, the assembly applauded enthusiastically. Isadora, stunned, could hardly believe what had just happened. Backstage, while eating cassava and apple cookies, Mrs. Gonzalez adjusted her glasses and sincerely praised the student. She had never seen anyone her age speak with such clarity and heart. Isadora, still insecure, asked if Bishop Robert had just been polite. She doubted her ideas were really special, but the teacher assured her that coming from him, every word carried weight. If Bishop Robert listened to her, it was because he saw truth in her words. The conversation was interrupted when Bishop Robert returned, accompanied by Sister Lucia and two guests, the youth pastoral coordinator of Lima and the principal of a Catholic school from the countryside. Sitting down naturally, Bishop Robert revealed that since the meeting with Isadora, he had not been able to stop thinking about what she had said. On the table lay the girl's notebook. Then came the proposal. They wanted to invite her to a one-week retreat in the mountains with young people from various dioceses. There, she could present her ideas and help develop a new pastoral program. The teacher was surprised. Isadora was only 11 years old, still in elementary school. But Bishop Robert argued that this was precisely what made her special. She saw the world with purity and wisdom, a faith that already illuminated other lives. He looked at her tenderly and said calmly that gifts were made to be shared. Isadora felt her heart beat faster. For the first time, being different seemed like a blessing. Sister Chen, with a welcoming smile, assured that she would have direct supervision and that her parents could accompany her. The dedication time would be light, about 4 hours a day. Friar Vicente explained that the idea was to help them rethink the pedagogical approach for children with special gifts. She would get to know current materials, the challenges faced, and be heard as part of the team. She would participate in meetings, in prayers, like someone who already belonged to the mission. Isadora was silent for a moment, absorbing everything. She asked in a quiet voice what exactly she would do. When she heard she would be treated as a team member, she murmured, almost in disbelief, "As if I were already part of it?" Bishop Robert nodded with a smile. For him, and more importantly, in God's eyes, she already was. The school principal, still cautious, reminded that it was a big decision. Parents should be consulted, and there was the school calendar. Sister Sandra promptly clarified that they were thinking precisely about the autumn holidays, which would start the following week. They would take care of everything, so that Isadora and her family would feel safe. Isadora thought about the holidays. She planned to read the books her father had given her, maybe visit her grandmother. But now, there was the chance to be part of something bigger, to help a mission focused on children like her, those who think differently, who believe, who dream. Even before becoming Pope Leo, Robert Prevost was already recognized for his deep and calm gaze, one of those that seemed to see beyond words. That late afternoon, in the discreet pastoral center of Lima, he observed Isadora Mejia gently, as someone who understands the weight of an important choice. Isadora hesitated. She wanted to accept the invitation, but a shadow of doubt stood in her way. What if it was all a mistake? What if she wasn't as special as they imagined? Sister Clara, who had been calmly following the conversation, broke the silence with tenderness. She knew some decisions need time and care, not haste. Isadora took a deep breath. She remembered the times she silenced her feelings for fear of not being understood. Maybe, she thought, it was time to stop hiding. With a firmer voice than she expected from herself, she said she would like to participate, if her parents, Hector and Mariana Mejia, agreed. Robert smiled softly and handed his notebook to the center's director. He asked her to write down the parents' contacts, promising to reach out to them that same day. While the director wrote, a subtle moment unfolded before Isadora. Robert and Sister Clara exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. Isadora's intuition did not fail. There was something more in that proposal. It wasn't just about joining a project. She felt there was an unspoken truth. Calmly, she shared her impression. Everyone turned to her, surprised by her perception. There was wisdom in that girl. Robert nodded slowly, as one who recognizes a sensitive soul. Yes, there was another reason. The mission went beyond teaching. It was something deeper, preparing the future of faith by listening carefully to those with big and humble hearts. Hearts like Isadora's. That was what made her special, the way she saw the world, the delicacy with which she noticed the invisible, all that could help the Church teach with more compassion and truth. It wasn't just about including her, but inviting her to create something new, something capable of transforming lives. The director interrupted the moment, reminding that Isadora was still a child and the matter required care. Robert respectfully agreed. Nothing would be done without her parents walking alongside, step by step. But Isadora deserved to hear the truth, because even before any decision, she was already part of it. He extended his hand to her, a simple but meaningful gesture. She thought about her quiet life, the books she loved, the shyness that sometimes limited her. Then she shook his hand firmly. Yes, she said. She accepted the call. As they walked through the old seminary corridors, Isadora noticed a curious detail. Sister Clara made discreet notes in a small leather notebook with precise and calm handwriting. With every question Isadora asked, the nun wrote something, always with a slight smile on her lips, as if every word from Isadora had weight and purpose. There was something mysterious about that attitude. Isadora felt she was not just being accompanied, she was being guided, observed gently but with rare attention. The next morning, she arrived early at the parish, dropped off by her parents, Hector and Mariana Mejia. Her eyes showed the fatigue of a sleepless night spent among thoughts and doubts. Sister Clara welcomed her calmly. Soon she was led to Dom Roberto, a bishop with a discreet presence who walked Lima's streets unnoticed, but whose soft voice seemed to carry the firmness of centuries. He silently guided her through corridors to a reserved wing of the seminary. They stopped before a dark wooden door. "This is the oratory of the ancient masters," he said before opening it. Inside, the space seemed suspended in time. There were old theology books, maps of distant missions, and children's drawings carefully pinned to the walls. In the center, on a simple table, lay an unfinished puzzle. The bishop approached and sat before it. He then said without ceremony he wanted to understand how Isadora saw the world, not just with her eyes, but with her soul. She, surprised, murmured she only thought about helping with simple tasks, maybe writing letters, collaborating in something practical, but he just smiled and replied that all that would come in due time. For now, he wanted to see how mind and heart united in her, in that silent gesture of putting loose pieces together. They sat side by side. It was just a puzzle, but there, in the silence of the oratory, under Dom Roberto's gaze, every piece seemed full of meaning. Later, in the parish room, Isadora was received by Sister Carmen for a series of mental challenges. No traditional exams. It was about observing how she thought, how she interpreted problems and found solutions. Sister Carmen explained the exercises patiently and handed her a small bell, a symbol that, when finishing each stage, Isadora should ring it. A simple gesture, but full of solemnity. Pope Leo, as he would one day be called, watched from a distance. He was still just Dom Roberto, but his presence radiated something rare, not power, but purpose. The first challenge appeared on the screen, a simple equation. Isadora took a deep breath and focused. She wanted to show she was willing to give her best, even without fully understanding the reason behind this process. As she advanced, the problems became more complex: pattern recognition, logical sequences, algebra questions, and verbal reasoning. With each solution, the missionaries and teachers present observed in respectful silence. There was something special about that young Peruvian, a peace in her eyes, a serenity in the way she thought. Dom Roberto, moved, murmured to Sister Carmen, "Remarkable, faith and clarity united in one soul." Carmen nodded, discreetly taking notes, "And this is just the beginning." When lunchtime came, Isadora took a break, but did not fully relax. Something in her heart disturbed her. When they returned to the exercises, she noticed the nature of the tasks had changed. Now, they required more than logic. They asked for compassion, creativity, and community vision. In one challenge, she had to imagine a plan to help a family in risk with few resources. In another, she devised ways to mobilize a parish to sustain a rural school. Each of her proposals revealed not only intelligence but sensitivity. By late afternoon, fully involved in that intense rhythm, Isadora barely noticed the time pass. She was exhausted, but alive like never before. Then Dom Roberto returned to the room, now with a more serious expression. "This challenge is special," he said, sitting before her. The device monitoring her attention was removed. For a moment, it was just the two of them, face to face. Isadora looked at him silently. She felt there was something greater behind all this, a mission she still did not understand, and yet she wished to follow it, not out of vanity, but because something was growing inside her, a subtle call, like a voice that is not heard but recognized. Robert invited Isadora to imagine the future. He wanted to know if she could create a project to strengthen faith and communion among people, how she would design it, without limits, only guided by the ideal. Isadora closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to dream. When she opened them, her words came with growing confidence, the fruit of an internal conviction maturing silently. She described something simple, accessible, and deeply human, a method that connected people through love and prayer, respecting their cultures and dignity. Robert, attentive, followed every word with a subtle smile. The true progress, she said, would be in the ability to bring hearts closer, not just gathering people, but creating lasting bonds, nourished by faith and charity. While speaking, her hands moved naturally over the paper, noting ideas with clarity and sensitivity. She proposed a system of meetings and sharing, adaptable to the needs of each community, led by local leaders and sustained by volunteer work. The atmosphere was filled with silent admiration. Robert's eyes and those of the missionaries accompanying him reflected surprise and respect toward that young woman whose vision transcended her age. When she finished, a brief silence settled. Robert, still moved, leaned slightly toward the teacher beside him and asked, almost in a whisper, if she had recorded everything. The teacher confirmed with an emotional nod. To him, what Isadora had imagined was the reflection of something many tried to build, but was rarely expressed with such lucidity. He then asked her how she had conceived such ideas. Isadora answered shyly and simply. She had thought of the people around her, what would make sense for them. For her, faith was the invisible bond that united lives, and it needed to be cared for with respect. At the end of that day, Isadora's parents, Hector and Mariana Mejia, arrived to pick her up. They briefly talked with the teachers about their daughter's progress, although they did not understand all the details. Through the window, Robert watched as the young woman left with her parents. Then he turned to the teacher with a conviction that left no room for doubt. She was exactly what they needed to build the future of faith. When the teacher questioned his certainty, reminding him that she was so young, Robert replied that there was an open mind and a heart that already saw beyond. He was decided. The next day, they would begin the next stage. The next morning, a small surprise awaited Isadora. Instead of Sister Chen, it was Robert Prevost himself waiting for her in the hall, dressed in a humble cassock and a serene smile. Isadora's parents, who only intended to leave her there before visiting the city, hesitated at the unexpected presence. Robert reassured them. He just wanted a calm conversation with the young woman in light of the impressive results from the previous day. Mariana, still curious, wanted to understand better what those assessments were about. Robert explained they referred both to reasoning and faith, and invited them to join a walk through the seminary garden. The family walked through corridors bathed in natural light to an inner garden where the sun filtered through trees and a creek whispered over stones. There, Robert shared the real reason for his approach. He told Isadora he saw in her something rare, the ability to perceive connections that escaped most, even among the brightest students. He said his path in the church had always been motivated by the desire to help, yes, but also by a broader mission, to strengthen mind and spirit, preparing hearts for a changing world. Now he believed Isadora could contribute, not by having all the answers, but by seeing with a new, sensitive and attentive eye. The young woman listened in silence, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. For Mariana, that was too big a responsibility for her daughter. Hector, on the other hand, recognized that if this was a calling, perhaps it should be heard. Isadora then realized she was facing something greater than she had imagined. The future still seemed uncertain, but also full of possibilities. Robert, now Pope Leo, raised his hands in a gesture of calm and sincerity. With serenity, he addressed Mr. Mejia, saying he fully understood their concerns. That was why he wanted that conversation. Open, honest, with everyone gathered. No secrets, only truth. Isadora's mother, with eyes trained by years of nursing, questioned internally what exactly had been assessed during those days. A mother's concern mixed with the curiosity of someone who had always sought to understand the world through care. Leo, with his usual calm, opened a book with detailed images and began gently showing the records. He explained, while flipping through, that the tests, although simple in appearance, had been carefully chosen to observe how the young woman's heart and mind reacted to challenges. He revealed unique connections in the images, especially those from the previous day, which indicated an uncommon sensitivity, traits that, according to him, could explain spiritual intuition and the ability to link seemingly distant ideas. For Leo, understanding these connections meant more than just studying a promising young woman. It was an opportunity to develop tools that would help others grow in faith and creativity, not to elevate some above others, but so that all could flourish together with divine grace. The mention of human suffering came naturally. The memory of the initial reason for the visit, the mother's desire to help those facing limitations, still lingered in the air. Leo assured that all of this would serve precisely that, to strengthen the pastoral mission and offer care to those most in need. Faith there was seen as medicine, spirituality as shelter. Hector and Mariana exchanged silent looks. There was concern, but also quiet trust in the words heard. Mariana, with the firmness of one who protects and loves, expressed the need to reflect as a family. Leo respected the moment, rising calmly and reaffirming that decisions of faith should not be rushed. The next day, after a long talk, Isadora returned to the community with her parents' cautious support. They set clear limits. The young woman would participate in activities only 4 hours a day, and one of the parents would always be nearby, even if at a distance. Leo accepted the conditions with respect and joy, pleased to keep the joint path alive. In the new stage, a sister led Isadora to a small room where a team waited. Experts in liturgy, pastoral care, music and teaching were there, ready to integrate the young woman into the missionary work. For the first time, Isadora did not feel just guided. She saw herself as a partner. The sister presented books, plans and teaching tools generously, inviting her to participate fully. During the following hours, the team shared details of the mission. They spoke about care in prayers, dedication in teaching catechism, and the power of music to elevate the soul. Isadora listened attentively, but not only that, she asked questions that surprised the missionaries and suggested new ways to engage communities with more sensitivity. As she expressed herself naturally, Leo watched her, silently admiring. He saw there a rare light, a spontaneous wisdom that did not come from books, but from a deep view of the world. Isadora absorbed the teachings, but also transformed them. Her presence there did not just learn, it illuminated. Later, while walking with Isadora's parents through the seminary gardens, Leo shared reflections on those assessment days. He explained that the focus had been prayer and deep listening, the effort to understand how the Spirit manifests in the concrete, in actions that touch lives, in pastoral visits that bring comfort, in teaching that guides, in love that rebuilds. He showed drawings, records, and moving reports of encounters that had renewed entire communities. To him, Isadora's sensitivity connected to that same purpose, building bridges where there was distance, rekindling hopes where exhaustion prevailed. Her unique way of seeing the world was not an exception to isolate, but a key capable of opening new forms of communion. In light of this, the future began to take shape. Leo made clear that if the young woman wished, she could continue alongside them in this mission, not to make everyone saints, but so that together they could grow in love and charity, feeding faith with concrete gestures. Mariana and Hector looked at each other again. This time, there was emotion in their eyes. Leo's simplicity and sincerity touched something deeper. And so, once again, they reaffirmed they needed to reflect as a family. But something had already changed. Everyone's heart there knew, silently, that the path was beginning to reveal itself. Robert stood with humility and serenity, asking the family to take the necessary time to reflect. The next morning, Isadora returned to the community, now with the discreet but firm support of her parents. She was willing to learn, contribute, and grow spiritually, respecting the previously agreed limits to preserve her energy and well-being. In the following meetings, held with church leaders, teachers, and experienced missionaries, Isadora was not treated as an inexperienced young girl, but as a valuable presence. She did not just listen, she was heard. When led by one of the nuns to a pastoral planning room, she came across maps, books, and proposals for social programs. The nun gently explained that all of that was also available to her. In the moments that followed, Isadora dove into the projects with active curiosity, proposing new approaches to make the care of communities even more effective and compassionate. She suggested that missionary efforts be adapted to the particular needs of each place, confidently pointing to the maps. A murmur of agreement ran through the group, followed by expressions of surprise and admiration. One of the missionaries, touched by the young girl's words, commented that such a vision made God's love closer, more alive, more real. Robert watched silently, but with a warmed heart. That light in Isadora's eyes was not just youthful enthusiasm, it was spiritual discernment. At the end of the day, while walking alongside her parents under the golden afternoon sky, Isadora felt a rare, deep peace, as if she were finally in tune with the rhythm of her own heart. Her father, Hector, watched her carefully and gently asked if everything was okay. She nodded with a slight smile. "For the first time, I feel my mind makes sense," she said, almost in thought. "Being different is not strange. It's valuable." She silently held the broader vision she sensed in Robert's actions, a subtle but powerful effort to renew faith and knowledge in the face of modern world challenges. On the last day of the pastoral visit, Isadora arrived at the community center and found Robert waiting for her, accompanied by her parents. The priest greeted them with a calm smile, eyes lit with hope. He led the family to a simple but welcoming room, where natural light flooded the space decorated with images of saints and sacred books. It was a space for listening, sharing, and faith. There, Robert presented his proposal. He would like Isadora to stay 6 months with the team, collaborating in community activities while continuing her studies with the support of carefully chosen tutors. There would be a balance between learning, spirituality, and childhood. There would also be time to play, to live lightly, a childhood guided by simplicity and faith. Hector listened cautiously, considering the school, friends, and routine they had known until then. Robert reassured him firmly and calmly. Nothing would be neglected. Everything would be followed with care and attention. Mariana, moved, saw not an imposition, but an invitation to discovery. She knew it was a lot for such a young girl, but also perceived that there was something different in her daughter, a silent, almost sacred gift. Robert spoke tenderly about Isadora's open heart, capable of touching other lives with her sensitivity. The journey would not be easy, but it would be full of grace. Faced with the proposal, Isadora felt a responsibility that did not weigh her down. It was as if something inside her said this was the way. She asked for the weekend to reflect. Robert respected the pause, emphasizing that the peace of the decision was more important than any urgency. Before saying goodbye, a missionary handed her a simple notebook with biblical verses on the cover. A discreet gesture, but full of meaning. Isadora smiled, touched by the delicacy of the gift. She felt at the beginning of something much bigger than herself, something that could transform lives, including her own. As they left the church, an unexpected movement surprised them. Reporters and cameras surrounded the main entrance. A security guard discreetly approached, informing them that Isadora's presence had been leaked to the press. Immediately, Hector wrapped his arm around his daughter, trying to protect her. Robert, keeping calm, suggested they leave through the side door. Guided by silent corridors, they left the place through a secure exit, accompanied by the security team to the car. While walking, Isadora felt the sudden weight of exposure. What had started as an act of faith and pastoral help took on public contours she did not want. But even so, inside her remained a serene certainty. The calling she had heard did not depend on spotlights. It was born in silence, in service, and in love. On the way to the car, a voice cut through the crowd, loaded with curiosity and expectation. Someone asked if it was true that Isadora was helping Father Robert transform religious education. The question hung in the air like a seed cast to the wind. The next morning, the answer was everywhere. Isadora woke up to the strange silence hanging over the house. She found her parents gathered in front of the laptop, their tense expressions revealing that something had changed. Mariana was the first to speak, with the softness of someone trying to protect. Someone had told the press about her role in catechism classes. In a few hours, the story had taken unexpected proportions. Isadora's heart raced. She asked how far it had spread. Hector, visibly uneasy, replied bluntly, "It was national news. Websites and newspapers displayed her name and face, calling her the prodigy of faith and education." In one of the images, she was shyly smiling, captured in a random moment at school, now transformed into a symbol. Mariana said reporters were calling the house in Lima. The neighbor, Mrs. Carmen, had reported the presence of news vans roaming the street. The feeling of exposure tightened Isadora's chest. They found out where she lived. Her name and the school she attended were enough to pull the threads of her private life. While reading the articles on her phone, she noticed the mix of truths and exaggerations. Being in the spotlight brought visibility, but also insecurity. Hector's phone rang. It was Robert. The priest's voice was calm but firm. He informed them that they were investigating the leak and had already arranged security for the family, as well as protected transportation. Mariana thanked him, trying to contain her worry. Robert, serene, made it clear that he hoped this would not shake their trust in the project they had started together. It was an unexpected challenge, but the mission remained alive. The family spent the day confined to the hotel. Messages of support from friends and teachers eased the weight of the moment. Isadora silently opened her notebook and began to write. Simple words, yet full of truth, came forth as a way to understand what she was feeling. From a very young age, Isadora felt a calling. There was in her a constant desire to help others with faith and wisdom, even on days when doubt visited her. In her free time, she engaged in community projects, visited the elderly, organized donations. She did not do it out of obligation, but out of meaning. Her heart beat in tune with the search for something greater. Hector and Mariana saw that light in their daughter, but also feared it might be extinguished by the pressures of the world. One afternoon, while the rain drew paths on the windows, Isadora gathered with her parents. She needed to listen to herself. She wanted to know what she really desired. Mariana tenderly reminded her that the answer was not in what others expected, but in what her heart asked for. Isadora confessed she was afraid, not of the work, but of what they would do with it. She feared being used, diverted from her original mission. Hector encouraged her. He said true faith required courage to act, even without guarantees. And it was with that courage that the next day they sought a mentor priest to discuss Isadora joining a charity project. She was clear about her conditions. She wanted to contribute, yes, but without giving up her studies, her childhood, her freedom. She wished to serve those in need, without distinction, without seeking profit or prestige. The priest smiled. In that youthful firmness, he saw reflected the essence of the gospel. There, alongside Robert, Isadora understood that the path she chose would be demanding but also deeply rewarding. It was a journey of faith, compassion, and responsibility, values that would shape her for the challenges ahead. In one of the most decisive conversations, Isadora announced firmly her choice. She would dedicate 1 day a week to pastoral work. She wanted time to study, play, be with friends, and live her faith without it becoming a prison. Robert listened silently. 1 day a week might not be much, but the maturity of the decision said more than any number. "And during the holidays?" he asked. "Maybe a few more days," she replied without hesitation. The priest smiled, not because he had gotten more time, but for recognizing in that young woman a rare wisdom. The conditions were aligned with the pastoral mission. Charity demands not only commitment, but also understanding of human limitations. "It's decided," he said. 1 day a week is a good start, and who knows, with time you might want to give more, when the time is right. Relieved, Isadora felt they were finally in sync. It wasn't about doing more, it was about doing it with truth. They talked about practical details that would shape Isadora's new journey. Every Thursday, right after classes at the Catholic school, she would participate in parish activities, always accompanied by her parents, Hector and Mariana, who stayed by her side, supporting every step. Before ending the meeting, Robert mentioned a special person she needed to meet. A young man named Alejandro who, like her, dedicated his talent to serving another mission. The mere mention of his name brought a new sparkle to Isadora's eyes, and she felt excited about meeting someone who shared the same purpose. 2 weeks later, she waited anxiously in a small room at the parish in Lima. The walls were decorated with images of saints and scenes depicting the city, a calm atmosphere contrasting with her racing heart. Although her parents were worried, they fully trusted Robert and the path he was charting for their daughter. When Alejandro entered, his shyness was evident in his gentle smile and calm gaze. Robert proudly introduced him, highlighting the work he had been doing in community projects, helping transform lives. Alejandro, in turn, had heard a lot about Isadora and greeted her with discreet enthusiasm. At that moment, Isadora felt she had found true support, a friendship capable of strengthening her faith and mission. Later, in a men's conversation, Isadora's father shook Robert's hand and commented impressed about his talent in mathematics. Robert replied simply, explaining that it all came down to recognizing patterns and making sense of numbers. Isadora observed the exchange, waiting for the moment to talk more intimately with Robert, away from the attentive ears of adults. When they were alone, Isadora shared a doubt that troubled her. She had read about the encyclicals, but there were aspects she could not fully understand. Robert smiled, remembering the beginning of his own journey, when he also studied the Church's teachings and found connections that many overlooked. He leaned forward and spoke about the challenge of being different, of seeing the world from a unique perspective. Isadora felt a wave of emotion. Finally, someone understood her. She confessed that at school she often felt out of place, a feeling Robert knew well. He told her about his days in seminary, when he questioned his teachers incessantly, not out of rebellion, but out of a genuine search for truth. For nearly an hour, they exchanged stories of faith, doubts, and discoveries. Robert, who studied theology at home and took online courses while helping at the parish, revealed that the bishop in the region was seeking young people with a spirit similar to Isadora's, dedicated and restless souls ready to transform the community. Isadora was surprised to hear that young people like her were being sought for a greater mission. Before she could ask more, her father returned smiling and joined the conversation. Robert took the opportunity to present an initiative involving a special group of teenagers devoted to faith and charity. There was Maria, organizer of food campaigns, Juan, leader of prayer groups, Sophia, who taught catechism classes, and Raphael, a natural talent for sacred music. Isadora looked at the photos, trying to grasp the magnitude of that invitation. Robert explained that these young people, although they had their routines and studies, gathered to face the community's challenges with faith, love, and concrete action. Her open heart and curious mind were exactly what they needed. She realized that helping at the parish was much more than a commitment. It was a call to something greater, an opportunity to grow and truly contribute. When she asked what would come next, Robert smiled serenely. Now, together, they would begin to build a better world. But all of this would only happen if she wanted it. Isadora looked at her father, then at Robert, who encouraged her with an encouraging nod. She thought of the past weeks, the mix of doubts and faith, challenges and hope, and finally felt ready to follow her path. She accepted the invitation with confidence, knowing there was still much to learn and mature. The handshake sealed the commitment, but no one could imagine that in just 6 months, that group of devoted young people would make discoveries capable of transforming countless lives. For Isadora, however, the most important thing was having found a place where being different was a gift, not a reason to hide. And that was what surprised everyone at that meeting between Robert Prevost and the young woman of extraordinary faith and intelligence. It wasn't the challenge he proposed, nor the fact she helped organize the parish, but the conviction that the future belongs to those who believe and act with love. Often, it is precisely these hopeful young people who wait for their chance to shine. This is the story of Isadora Mejia and Robert Prevost. Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of faith and transformation, like the video and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Share it with friends and family to spread compassion and hope around the world. Thank you for being here and see you in the next video.